So I'd like to acknowledge that the lands we work, play, and learn are on the shared traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Katzie, Kwantlen, Semiahmoo, and other Coast Salish people.
So, Mr. Landry was born and raised on Southern Ontario, moved to BC in 1991 to follow the cellular technology boom. He has worked for the provincial government since 1996, where he clerked in court from 1996 through to 2013. In 2013, he became a service design analysis, working with developers to modernize some process in the court system. In 2020, he won the position that he is currently in. So hi, Mr. Landry.
Hello.
Would you like to introduce a little bit about your job and what you're currently doing?
Sure. Thank you so much. So my name is Guy Landry, as you said or mentioned. My job is the manager of training for Court Services branch at headquarters, and we're 6 regions. Where the province is broken up into 6 regions, 1 through 6. Headquarters being the 6th region, and that's kind of. Do you want me to talk a little bit about what I do on a daily basis, or just that?
Sure. We would love to know what you do on a daily basis, kind of a summary of your job as well.
So it's a little bit of a hands-off job as compared to what I used to be just a few years back. What I do is I ensure that there's training put in place for any new initiative that comes into court services. As you could probably imagine, being a government company as well as something in court services, things are changing all the time. Either legislative, regulatory, the laws are changing all the time. So we have to be able to keep up with a lot of those changes. So we need to be able to modify our training as it exists to ensure that we provide the most up-to-date training for the staff that are coming in.
Yeah. So, what led you to pursue this career? Is it something you've always had in mind, or was it something that you later found an interest for?
That's a really good question, and it's one that I kind of struggled with in my mind as I was imagining that you were going to probably ask me that question. And I'll tell you how it all started. I was working as a waiter at the Sheraton Hotel in Guildford, quite honestly, and one of my very good regular customers was a court clerk in Vancouver, and she had mentioned that for the first time in her career, she had found that they were hiring people from outside of government to be able to work as court clerks. So I put my name in, and that was back in 1996. I put my name in, and I won that position at that time as an auxiliary position. I wasn't sure that this was really what I wanted to do. I just figured it was a good job, and it seemed to be secure and everything that I was looking for. I wandered around the province, kind of the lower mainland, attending upon courts that were short-staffed for court clerks at that moment in time. So I worked in Langley and Port Moody and Pitt Meadows, all these places, Burnaby, that no longer exist for courthouses anymore. But I ran around to each of these courthouses conducting or playing the role of the court clerk. From there, I secured a permanent position in Surrey, and I worked in Surrey for about 17 years. And then I started to move my way up through. That's where I went into service design analysts, and I started to get a little bit more excited about some of the things. But I love my job. I love my job as a court clerk. I loved it just about, I think, every single day I worked in there. It was always very interesting. You know, I listened to some stories that most people probably shouldn't listen to, but or have to listen to sometimes, because there's some horrible things that happen in courthouses like that. But for the most part, I love this position. I love what I do without a doubt.
And what do you find unique about this career specifically?
So my career as a training manager, or my career as a court services branch person, I think would be 2 different answers. So from my current position in manager of training, I find I struggle the most with this position out of all of the tasks that I've taken on so far in my career over the course of my 28 years, and that's that everything is so evolving, everything is so changing, and with COVID, everything just was changed so much faster than it ever had in the past. So we were making decisions at 4:30 p.m. The night of, to implement a change, and we'd had a process built and was ready to put in place, and then by 8:30 in the morning, that process had been changed by someone as a result of something else that had happened over the course of that evening. So that part made my position very exciting, like more exciting than it will be for these next few years, that's for sure. But I love that part. I love the all that new technology part. That's my favorite part of all of my positions so far.
Yeah. And well, like within this job, have you seen yourself develop, grow, like see any growth in yourself while like spending all your time doing this career?
Yeah, again, I think this goes back to how ever changing court services branch is all the time. So because we're not on the leading edge of technology as a rule. Government typically isn't, or hasn't been in the past on the leading edge of technology. So now that with COVID was a bit of a double-edged sword for us. It was a little bit of a great thing and a little bit of a bad thing for us in courts. But what it helped us do is helped us understand that technology really can fill some voids, or can be some solutions in court services branch that we hadn't contemplated before COVID had come. So that's kind of what keeps it exciting like that.
Yeah. At first you mentioned earlier this wasn't always a job that you thought you were going to go into. It was more of a decision you made later on. Was there the was there any educational requirements that you had to fulfill afterwards, or were the education requirements something you've already fulfilled previously?
No, I came in with a very limited education background. You know, I'm of the era where high school wasn't nearly as important as it was now, so we kind of floated through high school for the most part. Didn't really worry too much about where we were going, what we were doing afterwards. Now, in hindsight, in retrospect, if I would have had some of the things that I encourage my children to have now as young adults, I think I could have done much better even within court services branch. But I was stalled and an awful lot because I just didn't have the education. Now, going back to your question, do we learn any, or have I taken on any other things? The wonderful thing about government, guys, is that we love people to learn. So as much as you would like to learn, we will try to provide those for you. So if you're in a position and you want to be able to take up project management, we have all kinds of project management courses. If you want to take up some HR stuff, we have HR courses. So we've got a bit of a library of courses that we offer to everybody. And again, because technology and legislative things are always changing, we're learning kind of on a daily basis. So we're always being taught new things. Again, that's what makes government, my government anyway, most exciting.
Yeah. As we have several law classes in our school, I do think there's certainly some students that are hoping to go into this industry. Do you think, like, what are some advice you'd give to those students who hope to pursue this as their future careers?
I I would love to have more of you young people kind of participate or taking an active part in government, in our government. That's for sure. I think that you guys come in with a mentality that not an awful lot of older people like me still have. So you have that ability to be able to change on a dime. You can multitask in ways that we were never taught how to multitask. We didn't have to back then, of course. But I would say that it would be a career that I would promote to just about anybody. I think that short of it not being the best money in the world, that might be a problem. But it has been by far my favorite career choice moving forward.
Yeah. So as a question have popped up in the chat, it's asking, it sounds like court clerks is a good first step into a court service career. What sort of soft skills would help a person be successful? So what are your thoughts on that?
It's a great question, and court clerk is not usually the first step into court services. It's usually what they call a registry clerk, which is that the first step into court services branch. One of the things that they do is that from that point they learn all those. You have to understand that court services branch speaks a language that nobody else speaks unless you're in the law business. So we use acronyms and words that a lot of people don't use on a day-to-day basis. So it's a whole different mindset when you come into court services branch. So typically what we do is we'll bring you in at the registry level so that you're doing things like opening files, understanding how to read and interpret the data that's being submitted from the courtrooms. And then from there, as you progress, you start to move up into the into other positions like court clerking, things like that. I was very fortunate. I was one of the only people that was ever hired off the streets to be a court clerk back then, 28 years ago. Now it happens way more often, but not nearly as much. Now, going back to what this person asked about the soft skills would be if you're going to be in the courtroom, you have to be able to multitask. You have to be able to interrupt professionally, which is so very difficult to do. It sounds like it's fairly easy, but you've got judges that sit behind you, you've got lawyers that sit in front of you, and you need to be able to clarify things in a way that you're always respectful, of course, in that courtroom. So I would say those would be my favorite soft skills. You need to have a good sense of humor because, of course, we deal with some terrible things. We hear some terrible things sometimes in court. So you need to have a bit of a good sense of humor. And then professionalism is number one for me in the courtroom. You need to be able to kind of know when to speak, how to speak, those kind of things. But great job for sure.
And then going back to kind of students hoping to pursue this, as of now, what do you think are the education requirements that are required like to pursue this career? Any schools, any classes they should take, degrees they should have?
Anything in the criminology or the business field, I think that would benefit incredibly in anything that you do for court services branch. But keep in mind, the best thing about court services branch is that it's more than just you coming to work for us in court services branch. It's that you can go from here into any other ministry. You can go to the Ministry of Children and Family. You can go to the liquor and cannabis bureau. You can do anything from here, which is kind of the nice thing about this. So that's what I love most about it, is that it's a position that you can go anywhere for after once you get started.
So is there any classes that you recommend students take specifically for this?
Anything, if court services branch was really the place that you wanted to be, then anything in the criminology field. So criminology, the basic criminology courses, any law courses, anything like that. Because again, like I said already, it's because it's a language that not a lot of people speak, that law language, that if you can learn a little bit about that, it's very helpful.
So what are your what do you think are the skills required? Not as in like education, maybe as in like personal skills or just communication, just skills needed to do this.
You need to have you need to be again, depending on the type of position that you get, you need to be able to I'm trying to think of the right word, but we used to call it, you'd have a Teflon sole, right? So that anything that kind of hits you would just bounce right off of you. And you need to be able to have something like that sometimes, because like I said, there is a lot of things that you're going to hear that is going to be tough not to bring home sometimes. So you need to be able to kind of have that roll off your back a little bit more. And then soft skills, like I said before, I think mostly you need to be able to have that level of professionalism. You need to be quite organized. There's an awful lot of multitasking in a courtroom that goes on all the time. So I would say those things, law, anything in that law kind of field, so that you can understand a little bit more about processes. I think that would be critically, and anything in HR is always good for us.
So what do you find most rewarding about your career, what you do?
So my career now, I would have to say that the most, I don't know if you've ever heard this expression, but that aha moment, it's the moment in which you're trying to explain something to somebody that might be completely outside of their realm of life normally, and then they get that aha moment where you've finally been able to explain it to them in a way that they not only understand, but they get excited about that change. So I would have to say, for me, that's my number one thing. In the position that I had before as a service design analyst, it's a little bit more, and that was that I loved being able to make government processes more streamlined. So just to simplify the process in which people go through government desks. I don't know if you've ever been to any government house. It doesn't matter if it's the driver's license bureau. You think about all those processes in place and what we can do to kind of simplify things. You'll see that now we've got different numbering sequences that we can, so that people can get called up faster. We can make reservations to come in. Like, so many things are changing. That's the kind of stuff that I love to do. I love that out of the box thinking.
Do you see any room for growth within your career? As you've gone, like, do you see any room for growth, personal development? Like just growth in your career, just anything.
Yeah, I've been very fortunate, again, I'm a little bit for 28 years. It took me a long time because again, I didn't have the education coming in. If I did have the education coming in, the formalized education, I would have been able to move through the system even faster than I ultimately was able. But that's the great thing about government, you guys, is that you can start in any department, any division, any branch, and you can move around to dozens and dozens and dozens of different positions after that. It opens up a whole different world for you once you're into government as a whole.
Yeah. So was there any specific training needed for this career, this job, and how long did it take?
I took an awful lot of training courses. I took dozens and dozens of them over the course of the last 10 years of my career, because this is where I knew I wanted to be eventually, was get into headquarters and start organizing the training for the entire province. So I was taking courses the entire last 10 years of my career, kind of getting myself ready for this job. So I took every facilitation course that I could find. I went to the JIBC. I took a bunch of courses there as well on how to train adult learners, because it's a very different thing than teaching a high school student at school versus trying to train adult learners or teach adult learners things. So that was the big part for me, was that exact was getting all that training over the last 10 years, just because I knew I wanted to get moving forward with my career.
Yeah. So what are some common qualities of individuals who are successful in this field, in this law kind of field?
Hmm. Organizational skills and communication skills are probably the two biggest ones for me. You need to be able to multitask, like I said, because as a court clerk in a courtroom, you're often doing many things all at once, listening to a court conduct their business behind you, as well as trying to keep up with things that have gone on already earlier on that day. So I would have to say communication, organization, the ability to multitask, those would be some of the characteristics that we would look for sure.
Yeah. Are there any like common misconceptions or stereotypes about this profession, this job, that you think will be important to address to maybe students wanting to pursue this?
I think everybody in government always kind of feels the same way. It's that same kind of attitude that a lot of people have when it comes to government. But I think those are changing. I think that changed in a lot of ways. Hmm. I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that there is anymore. Not like there used to be. The old days was, I pay your salary, those kind of things. I don't know that we encounter those types of struggles anymore. So I wouldn't think that there's nearly as much as we used to.
Yeah. And with your typical day and stuff, how many hours would you typically work? Would it be like a typical like nine to five, or would it be more like it's very different from day to day?
No, I truly, my shift, my day is 8:30 to 4:30. I try to take an hour for lunch whenever I can, but quite honestly, I usually work into the evenings. While you're watching TV or something, I'll answer a bunch of emails. But typically, people within our group typically work 8:30 to 4:30, 5 days a week. Your holidays off, that kind of stuff.
So do you consider your job to be a flexible job, like one that's flexible, or?
It is for sure. Yeah, there's an awful lot of flexibility when it comes to everything that I do for my work.
Yeah. What are some interesting things that you think have happened in your workplace?
Hmm. Um, it all goes back to COVID. That's the thing, is that every time I think about some of the things that happened to us over the course of my, and I don't want to really talk about things that happened in a courtroom, because I don't know that that's necessarily what you'd be interested in. But as a result of COVID, we changed things in ways that I never thought in my lifetime as a court services worker I would ever see. I never thought that I would see kind of the judiciary leaning towards virtual appearances in the way that we are now. And so I would have to say that would be some of the most interesting stuff, or all these changes that we've made as it relates to MS Teams or Zoom or things like that, how we're changing the way that we're doing a lot of our business. So for me, that would probably be the highlight. Yeah, I would say that would be the highlight of my career. That point in my career was that the changes that we had to make as a result of COVID.
Yeah. And if you don't mind asking, what is like the average salary for this job, or what has the average salary come to?
So the interesting thing about government work is that all of our salaries are basically they're online. So you can go online anytime and you can just look up salary lookup tool and it'll tell you what all of these positions will earn. There's five steps in which people work through. They start at the lowest step. Over 5 years, they make it to the top step, and then they can start moving into different grids after that. So I would say it starts at about 48,000 and goes quite a ways up, depending on how far up you want to be able to go, but it'll take you into six figures pretty quickly, $125,000 or something, I would say.
And before we end, is there anything that you would like to tell the viewers, students, or anyone watching this?
So I see that there's two additional questions in the chat, and I don't know if do you want me to address kind of the first one? It says, are there a lot of court services positions that are now remote? Yes, is the answer to that question. I haven't been back to my office since COVID began, and I can't imagine that my desk would provide me with any greater amount of work or anything by having to travel into downtown all the time. So I've worked from home ever since. Are there a lot of positions? Absolutely. There's a lot of positions that are now remote, but there's still a ton of positions that take you right into the courtroom as well, because of course, most of these courtrooms have to have somebody within that room at that moment in time. So I would say that yes, there is a bunch. And then it says, the last one here says, what advice would you give students moving into the workforce now? Oh boy. I don't know if this is the advice that your teachers or your parents would want you guys to have, but I recommend you guys trying a lot of things when you're young, unless you have a true direction, like you want to be a lawyer, a judge, a doctor, a nurse. Those are very, very different, because there's different paths there's certain paths that you need to be able to take for that. But for me, I would say try as often as you can, move around if you're able to, while you still have that flexibility in your lives. So sorry, ask me that last question one more time, because I think I veered off into these answers.
Oh, I think that's about it. That's the last one was just to say anything. And if anyone watching this has any more questions, feel free to type them in the chat. Otherwise, I think that will be it. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, please type them in the chat for Mr. Landry to hopefully answer for us.
Yep.
As this meeting is starting to come to an end.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No.
No, I think that if given the opportunity, I would promote court services branch to anybody. I've had a tremendous career over 28 years. I've loved basically every minute of all of my work. Over the course of time. So for me, I would recommend it to anybody. I think it's treated me very, very well. I've met all kinds of incredible people. I've traveled throughout the province, working in different courthouses throughout the province, and I've loved every single minute of what we do, because we work so closely with like sheriffs and 3 levels of the judiciary. We do a ton of stuff like that. So I love stuff like that. So I would recommend it to anybody.
Yeah, question pop up in the chat. Do you wish you had tried anything else when you were younger?
No, I remember that because I'm only 28 years, so 28. I'm almost 60 years old now. I'm 59 years old. So I did all that at the beginning. I went all over the place. I drove school bus. I waited tables. I worked in a mushroom farm. I did all kinds of stuff. Now I wish I would have made a decision sooner in my life so that I could have retired a little bit earlier. But still, so no, I don't wish that I would have tried anything else when I was younger. That's for sure. I think I did a lot of that stuff as I was growing up. The cellular telephone business, that's what brought me out to British Columbia to begin with. But so no, I wouldn't say there was anything that I wish I could have tried or would have done.
Yeah, thank you so much. I don't think we're gonna get any more questions. I think that's about it, and our time is a little tight. So thank you so much for being here with us. We appreciate your time here. I'm sure that everyone watching, or everyone that will be watching later, is super grateful and have learned a lot from you. We've definitely learned a lot. Yeah, thank you so much. We appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure, that's for sure. And if there's anything you need, you can just reach out to me.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you so much. And for everyone else watching this live, we do have, I think, 2 or 3 more later today. So we're here to stay tuned if you're interested. Yeah, I think that's about it. Thank you so much
Awesome.
for joining us, Mr. Landry. Yeah,
Thank you so much, guys. Okay, good luck.
appreciate your time.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank
Okay.
you.